Welcome back everyone. In today's video, we're going to explore one of my favorite topics, black and white portrait lighting. I'll be walking you through how to create striking, dramatic black and white portraits using three of my go-to modifiers, a beauty dish, an optical snoot, and a Fresnel. And don't worry, if you don't have these exact modifiers, I'll be sharing some solid alternatives along the way. By the end of this video, you'll learn how these lighting setups can help you take your black and white photography to the next level. We'll be focusing on harder light setups today because hard light is typically my preferred way to go for black and white portraits because it really gives you that pop that helps your images jump off the screen. For this first look with Oneka, I started off by lighting her with a 70cm octabox boomed over the camera in that classic beauty dish position, right out there in front, pointed down about 45 degrees. Then I lit her with a strip softbox over each shoulder, and I added a third strip softbox to act as a hair light. Next, as I was tethering, I added a black and white preset so I could monitor the images in real time. And that's when I realized that the photo wasn't quite as contrasty as I would like, and the edge lighting looked way too soft on the edges of her hair, and so I decided to switch over to a hard light setup. First, I traded out all of the strip lights for grid reflectors. And then I changed out the octabox for a 70cm or 27-inch silver beauty dish. I then decided that I wanted to shoot at f11 at ISO 100 using my camera's standard sync speed. So I started off by metering the lights in the back, and I adjusted their power until they metered at f16. Then I metered the light hitting her face from the beauty dish, which was positioned about 24 inches or 60 centimeters from her face, and I adjusted the power until it metered at f11. Now, if you don't have a 27-inch or 70-centimeter beauty dish, a silver beauty dish, it really doesn't matter. You could get a similar look with a white one or a smaller one or a smaller silver one, or you could just use a fourth standard reflector that comes free with most lights or a grid reflector. It just likely won't be as forgiving on the skin as a larger beauty dish, and that's really the reason why you would use a modifier like this. And now as we look at the images side by side that were taken with the softbox on the left and the beauty dish on the right, and as we zoom in here to her hair, you can just see that there's a lot more texture here in the final image than we had with the softbox image. And that's exactly why you would want to use hard light in a situation like this, because hard light gives you more texture. I know that since you're watching this video, you're dedicated to learning and improving your craft, and I am too. That's why I've been diving into some marketing and business classes on Skillshare, today's sponsor. Running a photography business isn't just about mastering your creative work, it's about marketing, client management, and growth. I've been learning how to level up my business through Skillshare's classes covering these topics. Skillshare offers lots of classes taught by experts in areas like marketing, entrepreneurship, social media, and productivity. One thing I love is Skillshare's learning paths, which guide you through curated classes on specific skills. I'm using them to build my business and marketing knowledge so that I can grow my brand. If you're ready to boost your skills too, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will get 1 month free of Skillshare. It's a great opportunity to invest in your creative business and learn something new. Now we're going to talk about our next setup with Ethan. I started off by placing a large octabox behind him, and in front of it I placed a 20 by 30 inch or 50 by 75 centimeter piece of black foam core. And when you place foam core in front of an octabox like this, you end up creating basically the same look that you would get from 3 different strip softboxes. So this is going to create a rim light all around him, adding a kicker to the left and right and a hair light on top. Then I lit him from the front with an optical snoot and 2 strip softboxes for fill. Optical snoots are great hard light modifiers that you can use to create contrast in your images. For this one, I used the blades inside of the optical snoot to narrow down the beam of light into just a sliver, and that created the pattern that we see on his face. Optical snoots are great for projecting patterns, be they slivers like this one, or you can put gobos in them, which are metal stencils. And then what happens is that the lens on the front of the optical snoot focuses the shadow of those stencils or gobos onto your subject or your background. So you can use them to project patterns like this spotlight effect, or you can use them to create foliage. I have hundreds of these gobos, so really you can project any pattern that you can probably imagine. You can probably find a gobo for it and put it into an optical snoot. Now, if you don't have an optical snoot, then you can get a similar look by using a standard or grid reflector, and then between your subject and the light, just place two pieces of foam core to create basically two flags on either side of the shaft of light, and that will cut it down into a narrow strip. The closer you have that foam core to your subject and the further away you place the optical snoot from that foam core, the more defined the shadows from that foam core will be on your subject. It's not ideal, but it is a way to get a similar look if you don't have an optical snoot. So let's talk about our third look. I shot this old Hollywood film noir style portrait of Jordan by using a Bowen's 200mm Fresnel on my main light. A Fresnel is a glass lens that goes in front of your light, and it takes all of the light beams that are coming out of there and collimates them into one light source that goes directly forward. And a Fresnel is said to mimic the light that comes from the sun. So it's going to look like that type of lighting, but it's going to be a little bit softer because the sun would be about the size of a dime or 1 centimeter at 60 feet or 20 meters away from our subject. And in this instance, we're going to have something about this big, 8 inches or 200 centimeters, maybe 5 to 8 feet away from our subject. And so that's going to be a much softer and more forgiving modifier, but it's going to create a lot of contrast and it's going to make a very cool image. Now, in the old Hollywood era, they would have used hot lights, maybe ones from Mole Richardson that had these Fresnels, and that's the reason why we're using this type of modifier today. I'm going to talk about some alternatives to this particular Bowen's one in just a second. To round out the look, I had a kicker on camera left with a pair of barn doors and a grid inside, but the barn doors weren't affecting the shot. They were just there as part of the machinery holding the grid. I also had a light on my background pointed near the bottom of the composition, also with barn doors and a grid, and this created a gradient from the bottom to the top on the background, which is very common in these old Hollywood film noir style shots. I also had a hair light boomed out over the set, hitting Jordan from behind, and that light was modified with a grid reflector. All three lights striking Jordan metered at 5.6, and the light hitting the background also metered at 5.6, where it was pointed there directly at the background. All of the lighting created a lot of contrast, which I think is key when shooting black and white portraits. In addition, I styled him in a way so that there would be a lot of contrast in his clothing, as I played off between the black shirt and the gray jacket. I chose the crimson backdrop in particular because I thought I might end up wanting this photo in color someday, and then I would have that backdrop there. But the cool thing about this shade of crimson is that it converts to a very nice tone in black and white. This particular Fresnel was made by Bowen's and adapted to the Elechrome system, and it's been discontinued for some time, but you can still find them on eBay, and you might be able to find them on eBay already adapted to your particular strobe system. Now, if you don't get lucky finding one of these on eBay, you can also, for a fairly inexpensive price, get one that's made by Nanlite, for instance, as you see here with this image of Dyron, and these are readily available and relatively cheap, and they do come in a Bowen's mount, but you could adapt that to the mount for your strobes just by picking up an adapter on eBay if you're not already using strobes with a Bowen's mount. So that is a very good way to go, although just a little bit of a warning, these modifiers from Nanlite are very heavy because there's a lens sitting out there very far in front of your light, and so it's going to maybe cause a lot of downward pressure on them, so it may not be ideal, and you might have to continually repoint the strobe as it droops over time. But it is a fine and good way to go. Also, you could get the OG light, if you will. You could buy one of these Mole Richardson 407s on eBay and use that instead. I used it here in this test with Josiah and it worked fairly well. But just keep in mind that these are hot lights and they're going to get hot rather quickly and they might be uncomfortable for your model, but they do cost about $175 or so plus shipping. So that's something to think of as well. So now that I've talked about how I captured the image of Jordan, let's talk about how I would prepare it for retouching in post-processing. So I'm going to take this image into Lightroom, and the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply one of my black and white presets. You don't have to use one of my presets, but if you did want to, you could pick them up at johngress.com/presets. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to find the one that looks best to me, and I like the way that this one looks. I did notice that a few things need adjusted here and we'll get that taken care of, and I think this looks pretty good. And now this image is ready for retouching. So I could take it into a Voto, which is a program that I use for AI retouching, or I could send it to my friend Simon, who does all of my retouching by hand. I probably alternate between having half of my images done by a Voto and half of my images done by Simon. So if you're interested in reaching out to someone who can do the retouching for you at a really good rate, I would suggest that you contact him, and I'll put his Instagram here on screen. So to wrap things up, you saw how using a softbox could be okay, but maybe using a beauty dish would be better in order to create texture. And really, in general, hard light is going to create a lot of texture and give you that pop and contrast that hopefully you're looking for in black and white. I know that it is artistically valid to go for a very soft black and white image, but I just like to be dramatic, and that's why I like using hard light for my black and white portraits. Optical snoots are great for that sort of dramatic lighting where you're creating shafts of light and just narrow beams on people's faces or projecting patterns. And so I love those for black and white as well. A Fresnel modifier can create that look of sunlight and help you achieve that classic old Hollywood film noir look. But if you can't manage to find one of those, you could just use a grid reflector with maybe a 10-degree or so grid. I hope that all of these setups that we went over today will inspire you to try these things out on your own, because practicing is really the best way to take things to the next level. Also, if you could please leave in the comments how you like to light for black and white and some of your go-to setups, that would probably really be helpful for the other people watching this video so that we can all get better together. And that's what it's all about. I also have a handbook that's all about lighting for black and white with over 20 different setups. So if you want to check that out, you could go to johngress.com/lighting handbooks. If you could please like, subscribe, and sign up for the bell, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.